Honeywell International, Inc. You've likely heard the name. Huge company, multinational, now based out of Charlotte, North Carolina.
Yeah, definitely a familiar name.
But what do they actually do? We've pulled together a bunch of sources, history, recent reports, investor stuff, to try and give you a clear, digestible look at the company.
What it does, where it seems to be going.
Exactly. And what investors think. Plus this really interesting quantum computing angle they have.
It's pretty amazing how far back they go. Origins in 1906.
Wow.
And you can kind of see the seeds of today's company even back then. That 1929 merger that formed Minneapolis Honeywell right before the crash speaks volumes.
Resilience, yeah.
Yeah.
And buying thermostat controls in the 30s, broadening out.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't always just thermostats in aerospace, though, was it?
Okay.
I saw they used to import Pentax cameras.
That's right. Bit of a surprise. And they even dipped into computers with Datamatic in the 50s.
And, of course, that T86 round thermostat. Can't forget that.
A classic piece of design, really. Shows that innovation history.
Absolutely. So our goal today, for everyone listening, is to give you that solid picture. Honeywell now, the future plans, investor takes, and the quantum connection, without making your head spin.
Sounds good. Let's dive in.
Okay, so Honeywell today. What's the current setup?
Right. So today it's basically built around 4 main business areas or segments. First up is aerospace.
Okay, planes and stuff.
Pretty much products, services for aviation. And what's really interesting there is the demand, especially for new business jets. It's strong now, looks good for the future, particularly North America.
So growth potential.
Yeah, forecasts are looking at stable growth there for like the next 10 years. And they just inked this huge deal with Bombardier.
Oh, yeah.
Next-gen avionics, propulsion systems, lifetime value, they're saying, is around $17 billion.
$17 billion. Wow, that's a big commitment. Locks them in for a while.
Definitely. Shows their ambition in aerospace, for sure.
Okay, what's next after aerospace?
Building automation. So think control tech for buildings, HVAC, security, that sort of thing.
Right, and how's that doing?
Seems pretty strong. They're reporting good order rates, especially in areas like data centers, airports, hospitality. Busy sectors right now.
Makes sense. Then there's industrial automation.
Yep. That one's a bit more tied to economic recovery, Depends on product demand picking up and whether their customers are ready to spend on big equipment, that kind of capital expenditure.
So a bit more cyclical, maybe?
Potentially. They are seeing some green shoots, they call them, in some markets, which is positive. And it's worth noting they plan to sell off their PPE business personal protective equipment.
Okay, divesting that. And the fourth segment.
That's Energy and Sustainability Solutions, or ESS, focuses on energy projects.
Like LNG, I saw that mentioned.
Exactly. Liquefied natural gas is a big one. They're seeing a strong pipeline of projects globally in that whole energy space.
Gotcha. So these 4 core areas, but they operate everywhere, right? Globally.
Oh, yeah. Huge global footprint across loads of industries, different countries.
And didn't I read they run Sandia National Labs for the government?
You did. They own and operate Sandia under contract with the Department of Energy. That's a massive responsibility, shows their technical depth.
Definitely. And workforce-wise?
Yeah.
Still pretty big.
Around 102,000 employees globally as of 2024 figures. So yeah, major employer.
When they joined the NASDAQ 100 a few years back.
2021, yeah. Another marker of their scale. We should probably also mention Honeywell Forge. That's their analytics platform for industry.
Right, data stuff.
And Honeywell Robotics, which is all about automating supply chains.
Okay, so a really diverse picture today. Aerospace, buildings, industry, energy, plus labs, software, robotics. Busy company.
You could say that.
All right, let's pivot then. Where's all this heading? The future outlook. This seems like where the big news is.
Absolutely. This is the really significant shift. They have announced a major strategic realignment.
Realignment, what does that mean in practice?
It means they're planning to separate their automation and aerospace businesses. By the second half of 2026, the idea is to have 3 independent publicly traded companies.
Wow, okay, splitting up the giant.
Pretty much. Think of it like a big restaurant deciding to spin off its bakery and its catering service into separate businesses, each focused on doing one thing really well.
So 3 focused companies instead of 1 conglomerate. What are the focuses?
Automation, the future of aviation, and energy transition. That spin-off of their advanced materials division fits into the energy transition piece too.
And the thinking behind it. Why make such a huge change?
Well, according to Honeywell, it's driven by what they see as unprecedented demand coming in aerospace.
Back to the jet demand.
Exactly. They think by separating, each company can be a leader in its field, with, sharper strategies, clearer growth paths for their specific markets.
Makes sense. More focus. Could attract different investors, maybe?
That's likely part of the thinking too, potentially higher valuations, maybe more agility, but it does add complexity, managing three separate entities.
True. What about leadership? Darius Adamczyk is chairman. Vimal Kapur is CEO now. Mike Stepniak coming in as CFO. Do we know who leads the new companies?
Not yet. They haven't announced the specific management teams for the new entities. The expectation is the current leadership will stay involved somehow, but the board will make the final calls.
Okay, something to watch. And financially, what are they projecting heading into this split?
For 2025, they're expecting overall segment margin to go up, mostly driven by the automation side. Aerospace margin, though, is actually expected to dip a bit.
Ooh, why is that?
Primarily because of the CEES acquisition they made recently. Integrating that has costs.
Gotcha. And overall earnings, cash flow.
Overall EPS for 2025, they're forecasting between $10.10 and $10.50, and free cash flow somewhere between $5.4 and $5.8 billion.
Okay, and they're still moving the HQ to Charlotte, right? That's ongoing.
Yeah, that relocation is still part of the bigger picture here.
So big strategic shift, aiming for focus, financial targets set. Let's talk about the market reaction. What do investors make of Honeywell right now?
Generally, sentiment seems quite positive. Very positive, actually. Altindex had their sentiment score at 100 out of 100 back in March 2025.
A perfect score.
Yeah.
Wow. Compared to peers.
Yeah, ranking really highly in its industry. So that's a strong signal.
Definitely encouraging. But sentiment is one thing.
Mm.
What about actual stock price forecasts? Always take these with a grain of salt, obviously.
Absolutely. Big caveats apply. But looking at long forecast, their model suggests, well, a bit of a dip through most of 2025.
Oh, really? Downwards.
Yeah, potentially bottoming out maybe around the $170 mark in May or June 2025, according to their model. But then it forecasts a recovery starting in 2026.
And longer term.
Longer term, their projection goes up quite a bit, potentially hitting $310 by May 2029. But again, it's just one forecast model.
Interesting, though. Positive sentiment score, but a forecast suggesting a near-term dip before growth. Maybe the sentiment reflects that longer-term view.
Could be. Investors might be looking past the short-term fluctuations towards the potential of the restructured companies.
What are the Wall Street analysts saying? More short-term view there, usually.
Right. TipRank shows the current consensus is a strong buy.
Strong buy. Okay.
And the price targets are pretty spread out. The low is $178. The average is around $224.58. But the high target goes up to $260.
So analysts, on average, see decent upside from current levels.
That's what the average suggests, yeah.
What about institutional ownership? Big funds holding the stock, does that tell us anything?
It often indicates confidence from, the big players. And yeah, recent filings show lots of institutions hold Honeywell, Iowa State Bank, Czech National Bank, Rumline Advisors. A broad base, usually seen as a good sign.
Okay, and their last earnings call, Q4 2024. Any key takeaways?
Yeah, they highlighted beating their own guidance for organic sales and adjusted earnings, so performing well operationally.
Good.
They also talked about capital deployment, put $14 billion to work in 2024 through acquisitions, buybacks, dividends, and they're committed to deploying at least $25 billion total through 2025.
So actively returning value and investing.
Seems so. Plus, they plan to reduce the share count by at least 1% over the next year. Share buybacks.
Right. Often boosts earnings per share. Okay, so positive signals from the company, generally good vibes from investors and analysts, despite some near-term forecast wobbles.
That seems a fair summary.
Let's switch gears again to something really fascinating and quite forward-looking. Honeywell and quantum computing.
Yeah, this is definitely cutting-edge stuff. Honeywell has a big stake in a company called Quantinuum.
Quantinuum.
Okay.
What do they do?
They're positioned as a leader in trapped ion quantum computing. That's a specific way of building quantum computers. And they also have a whole suite of quantum software.
Trapped ion. So they trap individual atoms.
Yeah.
With lasers or something.
Basically, yeah. Using electromagnetic fields, often involving lasers, to hold ions very precisely. It's an approach known for potentially high accuracy in calculations.
Okay. And why is Honeywell, this big industrial company, so deeply involved in quantum? Seems a bit out there.
Well, they see it as potentially revolutionary for their industrial customers. Game-changing, really.
How so?
Right.
Where would it apply?
Think about their core businesses. Aerospace. Quantum could massively speed up designing new materials, lighter, stronger stuff for planes, or run incredibly complex simulations for aerodynamics. optimize air traffic control.
Okay, I can see that. Materials and simulation.
Exactly. Then, in their materials and tech segment, PMT, designing new catalysts for chemical processes, understanding reactions at a molecular level, creating totally new materials. Quantum could unlock that,
Right. Faster R&D.
potentially much faster, even in things like supply chains and logistics, which ties into their SPS segment, or optimizing energy use in buildings. Building technologies, quantum computing could solve optimization problems that are just impossible today.
So it's a bet that this tech will fundamentally change how these industries work.
That's the idea. It's not just a side project, it's a calculated move. Imagine designing a new aircraft alloy in days instead of years, or optimizing a global supply chain perfectly. That's the kind of advantage they're hoping
And
for.
Honeywell isn't just an investor, right?
Yeah.
They're involved more directly.
Yeah, it's a really interesting dual role. They actually supply Quantinuum with the critical ion traps, the core hardware component,
So they make the essential bit.
a key part of it, yeah. But they're also a customer. They're using Quantinuum systems, testing them out, figuring out how to apply these emerging quantum solutions to their own industrial problems.
A supplier and a test bed. That's smart synergy.
It really is.
Has Quantinuum made actual technical progress? It's still early days for quantum, isn't it?
It is, but they've hit some notable milestones. They set records for quantum volume. That's a metric trying to capture overall capability.
Okay.
They've shown really high gate fidelities, like over 99.9% accuracy for certain operations on one machine.
Yeah.
That's crucial for reliable calculations.
High accuracy is key.
Definitely. And they worked with Microsoft to demonstrate logical qubits.
Logical qubits, what's that?
It's basically a way to tackle errors. Quantum computers are super sensitive to noise. A logical qubit uses multiple physical qubits together with clever error correction to create one more reliable, fault-tolerant unit of information. It's a huge step towards building quantum computers that can actually solve large, complex problems reliably.
Okay, so dealing with the error problem. That sounds important.
Absolutely essential for scaling up. And they're researching other advanced stuff needed for fault-tolerant quantum computing, too.
And for people watching this space, is Quantinuum likely to go public? An IPO?
It's a general expectation, yeah.
Oh.
An eventual IPO seems likely. That would be a big deal for the quantum sector.
And potentially a way for Honeywell to cash in on its investment while giving Quantinuum more capital.
Exactly. It provides potential monetization for Honeywell's stake and fuel for Quantinuum's future growth in what's going to be a very competitive field.
So this quantum angle, it's really a long-term strategic bet, isn't it? High risk, potentially massive reward.
Precisely. It's about positioning for significant technological disruption down the line, disruption that could reshape their core industries. The success of Quantinuum and how Honeywell leverages that connection will be really key to watch.
Okay, wow. We've covered a lot of ground here, from thermostats to quantum computers. Let's try and pull it together. What are the main things listeners should take away about Honeywell?
Okay, key takeaways. First, it's a really diverse global company. Aerospace, building automation, industrial automation, energy, and sustainability. Those are the big pillars today.
Right, diversified.
Second, huge changes are coming. That strategic split into 3 separate companies focused on automation, aviation's future, and the energy transition. That's a massive restructure.
A big split, got it.
Third, investor sentiment currently looks pretty positive, backed by analyst ratings, even if some near-term stock forecasts are a bit bumpy.
Positive sentiment, strong by consensus.
And finally, they're making a serious long-term bet on quantum computing through their stake in Quantinuum. It's a forward-looking move, positioning them for potential future tech breakthroughs.
Diverse operations, strategic split, positive sentiment, quantum bet. That sums it up well.
Pretty much.
So, as we wrap up, maybe a final thought for everyone listening to mull over. Considering this major restructuring Honeywell's undertaking and this significant push into something as potentially world-changing as quantum computing, what are the ripple effects going to be?
Good question.
How might these moves really reshape the industries Honeywell operates in? What new opportunities might open up? Or what challenges might arise, not just for Honeywell, but for its competitors, too, as this whole landscape evolves?
Yeah, how does an industrial giant navigate becoming potentially 3 nimble leaders while also betting on foundational tech?
Exactly. Lots to think about there regarding the future shape of these industries. Definitely something to keep an eye on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.